Welcome to the Founders Corner, brought to you by OneBridge Accounting. Here's your host, Eli Clark. Welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have you all here today. I have a great guest. We have Neal Rummler, the CEO and founder of Maverick Marketing and Consulting, with us here today. Neal, very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Neal, if you just give us a few minutes, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and kind of the dent you're trying to make in the world.
Yeah, so I'm currently the CEO and founder of Maverick Marketing, concentrating in the pest control space. Prior to this, I knocked doors and managed teams in pest control, door-to-door sales for over 10 years. And then it got to the point where I had a family with kids, and I said, hey, this isn't going to work. I need something a little more stationary, a little less mobile. So I bounced around from a few companies managing their termite programs. And for those that don't know, what we do typically in pest is they sell door to door general pest control, which is just your typical spraying for bugs, ants, spiders. My guys, they'll go out and they will upsell those current customers on termite control. So primarily in the Midwest, South areas where there's more of a need for that is where they're primarily concentrated. So I've been doing that for about a year now.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Neal, again, it's great to have you on the show. I'm very excited to dive into kind of some of your experience, what I would say is kind of unique experience with your education and your work experience, and then how that kind of led you into Maverick. So very excited to jump into that. Let's start. I'd love to talk a little bit about first you explain your education background a little bit, right? So you have a Juris Law degree, is that right?
I have a JD, yeah, Juris Doctorate. So, if I was really pretentious, I would say you need to address me as a doctor,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to do that. No. So,
Thanks. Appreciate that. I had a professor in college who had a doctorate and two masters, and we called him Doctor, Master, Master, just kind of as a joke.
yeah, just
But
to poke fun at it. Yeah, it's like I'm not big on titles, and
uh,
I'm not big on degrees either. Like, I'm actually writing a book right now. It's called "Don't Buy the Lie," and the lie is that you need a college degree or advanced degrees to be successful in life. And I learned the hard way going through 7 years of higher education that, it took me 7 years to learn that lesson. And when I talk to young people today, I'm like, hey, if you are passionate about a particular field, like you really love accounting, you really want to become a doctor, go to college. I'm not completely anti-college, but if you're just going to college to figure stuff out, figure your life out, figure out what you want to do, and you're spending an exorbitant amount of money, I think it's the biggest waste of time and money that you could be doing it as a young person. So I grew up in a household that valued academia and grades, and it was like, hey, you get good grades, you're going to be wealthy, you're going to be successful. And so I put
mhm.
a ton of pressure on myself to get a 4.0. I had a 4.2 GPA in my high school graduating class. I think I graduated sixth out of 600. So I
Wow.
was I was the nerd, right? And then that
Right.
got
Yeah.
me to BYU, and then my whole strategy at BYU was like, okay, I got to get a 4.0 because I'm not a minority. Like, I'm going to have a really hard time getting to BYU Law. I wanted to go to BYU Law because the tuition is so low. I knew I could graduate without debt and kind of escape that rat race of trying to pay your student loans off. So I worked really, really hard in college, got a 3.87 GPA, got into BYU Law. I was like, dude, I've got it made in the shade, super stoked. And then the way law school is structured, your entire career and your prospects are determined by your first semester grades. So you don't really even know what
Mm,
you're doing. But the reason that your career trajectory is determined by that first semester is because your first summer internship is usually what leads to a full-time position. So
mm.
in order to get those full-time, those really good internships with private firms, they want to be hiring the best of the best. And so keep in mind,
Right.
BYU, I'm competing in a class of 130 with people who got accepted to Harvard and Yale, but they chose to come to BYU because of the cost. It's such a good deal. The tuition I think I was paying back then was like 6,000 a semester.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
super, super cheap. That was back in 20, I started in 2016 is when I started my first year of law school, so about 10 years ago. And about halfway through, I figured this is not going to work. Like I saw what attorneys did on a day-to-day basis, and I graduated in the bottom 50% of my class. So I was the dumb one in my law school class, right? It's like that was a very humbling experience
You're
for
like,
me.
oh my gosh, right?
I was
Yeah.
I was used to being like I excelled in whatever I did prior to that, and in the moment I was devastated. I was like, my world is rocked. I'm never going to be wealthy. I'm going to be a public defender. All these thoughts swirling through my brain, and then I saw what attorneys do on a day-to-day basis, and really the light bulb that came on in my head was it wasn't so much like, oh, this is like miserable work. At least for me, I knew it would be. It was more of like the concept of trading your time for money. And I made
Hmm.
that connection of like, okay, there's only so many hours in a day, in a week, in a month. And the model of lawyers and the way they're paid is the billable hour. Yes,
Right.
eventually when you get to become a partner, there's profit sharing, but that's a 7-year grind usually to become a partner. So I just looked at that path to wealth and I'm like, man, that sounds so miserable working 70, 80 hours a week, for the hope of becoming a partner. And with the
Right.
grades that I had, I wasn't going to be able to jump right into a private firm. They want people that are in the top third, preferably the top 10%. So that's something that it wasn't told to me. I didn't realize that, oh, only the top third actually get those good jobs. And so I was looking at 50, 60 grand as a salary coming out of law school. And prior to law school, I had already knocked 3 summers and I had already
Hmm.
made that much in 3, 4 months knocking doors, selling pest control. So I'm like, I'm not digressing here. Like, what's going on? I was supposed to level up. I was supposed to make more money as an attorney. And yeah, that's basically how I shifted into sales because I was good at it. I was really good. And I remember telling my story to an attorney on the door, and he said, we all eventually gravitate to what we're good at.
Hmm.
And I never forgot that. I was like, you know what? We should pursue our strengths. Whereas I think in America, the education system is more catered to, hey, let's produce jacks of all trades. Let's make you very average and mediocre at a lot of things. Whereas, like, if you look at other countries and the way their education programs are structured, they focus on strengths. It's like, hey, you're
Hmm.
really good at math. Let's put you in like mostly math classes because that's your strength. Let's
Hmm.
not let's not belittle
Double down on that. Yeah.
yeah, let's not make you feel dumb because you got a C in English. Let's cater to your strengths. And I saw that because I did a church mission in Hungary for 2 years, and I saw kind of the contrast in education systems. And so that just seeing that in my background with like, okay, the income potential if I get into sales and as a business owner, the sky's the limit. So
Right.
when that light bulb popped or like when it turned on of like, okay, trading your time for money versus sky's the limit, that's when I knew, hey, my calling, like what I'm going to have the most success in is business ownership and sales. But it's funny because in high school, that thought never crossed my mind.
To
Never
do
crossed
sales, to go
to
into
do
that.
sales, to do sales,
Yeah,
because that in society's viewpoint, society views sales kind of with there's a stigma behind it. It's like the pushy
for
sales,
sure.
used car salesman. That's the stereotype and the kind of the rap that salespeople get in America. But the really good salespeople, and this is what I've come to find out, it's like yes, there's pushy people out there, but the really good ones, they'll leave you and they'll leave a conversation, and the prospect is actually thanking the salesman because they're more of a guided advisor, they're an advisor that's guiding them through the decision-making process. And so that's the way that I train my people is like, don't be confrontational. It's not going to work. It's just
Hmm.
like that's like beating up against a brick wall. Like get the prospect to open up with questions, find the problem, show them where the value is, and then they're gonna close themselves when you show a good enough value proposition.
Oh, definitely. Well, there's a lot we can unpack there, just from what you were saying, right? Looking at education and looking at what education is actually valuable in the real world, or depending on what you want to do, right? Like you mentioned, if you want to go into something that is more maybe a little bit more technical and it needs a degree to move forward with, right? Then that makes sense to go to college. Whereas in maybe other situations where if you want to start a business or if you want to be a little bit more independent or you want to do sales or something, education, formal education isn't often required, right? So in your experience, obviously you've got this kind of academic background, so you've got that, but where, or I guess, how do you see other elements of education, whether that's maybe courses you took or um, other things? How does that influence what you do now? Does that make sense? Right? How did you make that transition, or how has other educational sources impacted you?
So I wish I had sought out mentors a lot sooner.
Mm,
So if you go back and you study history, how were architects trained? How were masons trained? It was a master apprentice model, right? And
mm,
so the apprentices were learning from these masters, hands-on, using their hands. It wasn't theoretical in a classroom. And my dad's a dentist, and I asked him, I was like, "Hey, Dad, how long would it take you to train me to do and know and be competent in everything that you do for your patients?" And he's like, "I could probably do it in a year or two of practical hands-on training."
oh
And
wow,
it's
yeah.
like, so it's like, how many hoops do you have to jump through to become a dentist? And there's all these weeder out classes in college, like chemistry and like these really hard science classes to just weed the pool. Because if there was a bajillion dentists out there, and then they wouldn't be able to charge as much. So it's like I thought about that and I was like, there's a lot to be said for that. Practical training, I think, has an immense value for the real world. So it's like, who better to ask than somebody who's already been there, done that? And what I
Right,
tell my salespeople is like, you should not be taking financial advice from your broke parents. Like their net worth is negative 400,000. Like they're still paying off their student loans. Like you should
right, yeah,
you should be taking advice from somebody that has a 10x net worth compared to you, because it's like that's who's going to benefit you. And then when you get that hit that milestone, find other mentors. And that's really what did it for me. Like
yeah,
growing up in my middle class household, it was like, I think my dad made about 200,000 growing up, and that was like the pinnacle of success. And I think a lot of kids measure their own potential and worth based on how successful their parents are, just because that's what they know. And then
hmm
once I started hanging around different people and like different groups networking with high net worth individuals, I was like, oh my goodness, like my potential, the potential of what I knew to be possible or what I thought to be possible, it suddenly just it shifted upward. It was like,
hmm
oh dude, if I could just hit 500,000, now that's going to be the pinnacle.
right,
750, a million. And then I have a partner, who's making over 3 million a year. And I'm like, whoa, that's impressive, dude. Like, how did you do that?
right.
Talk to me. Let's talk. Like, how does that happen? And so I can't understate the value of mentors. And you'd be surprised how many people are very, very willing to give advice, because once you've made it and like you've checked the box of money, you're looking for fulfillment at that point, and it's you get a lot of fulfillment from helping others and like giving that advice, especially to somebody who's seeking it out actively. That's what I like doing now, is I like coaching my people and it's being like, hey guys, let's just not blow all your money on a Ford Raptor. Like let's talk
hmm
about how to grow your money. Let's be responsible this time. Let's not just spend it on some flashy vehicle, or a Gucci t-shirt that's $800. Don't do that.
I love this idea that you're saying, this idea of leveling up, right? And that there's different levels, like you might, depending on where you're at in your life, right? It might be 100,000 a year is the goal, right? And then it's 200,000, and then it's 500,000, and then it's a million, right? And there's always somebody who's making more money than you, right? Or who's doing something that you want. And there's people out there, like you're saying, who get a lot of fulfillment and they get a lot of joy from guiding and mentoring people to that next phase, right? And there's unless you're Elon Musk, right? There's always something
Yeah.
more you could do financially, right? And that's just one aspect of life. There's also so many other aspects beyond just the amount of money that you make, right? That allows you to look at and to see like what's the next thing. How do I bring in a mentor? How do I bring a guide? How do I educate myself to reach whatever that goal is, right? In the different areas of your life. So that's really insightful. What how do so let's say we're talking about experience a lot, right? Like in experiences where if you talked about your dad being a dentist, you got 1 to 2 years of experience, and then you could become a dentist, right? Hypothetically, in this kind of situation, how did you segue your experiences in pest control and your experiences in education and just all those things? How did that lead you up to starting Maverick? Right, because it seems like you were kind of focusing on sales, and then what made the transition into the kind of the agency or the kind of marketing space?
Yeah, so one of my weaknesses, I'm very risk averse, and the decision has to be perfect for me to make it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm a little more calculated deliberate in my decision making as opposed to I think a lot of entrepreneurs they leap before looking. They don't even know what's coming. They're just like, I'm gonna go, man. I'm gonna go. Whereas like I take a little bit too much time. If I'm looking at a ski jump, I'm like measuring it, I'm like doing the math to like see how fast I need to go. That's my personality. And so it's good and bad because it's good because like I avoid I've had very few failures in my life, but at the same time it's like it's made me more afraid. And that's
Mm,
the most vulnerable way I can say is like that's something that I think has limited me up to this point in my life. I'm getting better at it, at taking risks, taking calculated risks. But really what it came out, the reason I started the company was I was able to identify inefficiencies, things that were just frustrating. I'm like, why aren't you doing this? Like you're
hmm
defying logic. Like some of the owners I was working with when I was working with certain pest control companies exclusively, it was like I had this rock solid idea that made perfect logical sense,
hmm
but I just kept getting shut down, shut down. No, that won't work. That's a terrible idea. And so I was just kind of like, okay, I'm done. Like if you're not going to value my insight and my opinion and you're just going to like restrict me to the point where I don't have any creative uh, runway to make my own decisions and improve the program myself, then I was like, okay, I'm out. And it
hmm
was really what pushed me out was being undervalued, feeling undervalued, and then I could just tell I mean, I wasn't. It was never enough. It was like I did a 7.5 million for this company, and it was
Wow.
just like it was like in 8 months. I did that in 8 months for him.
You brought in that much revenue, right?
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was always just like, yeah, yeah, it could be better. I mean, and it was just kind of like, all right, well, if you're not going to value me and give me the attaboy and pat on the, I mean, I don't need like a ton of praise, but like I felt undervalued and I was like,
Right.
I'm gonna go do my own thing. And it was stressful. It took me about 4 or 5 months to get a client, and I didn't have any paychecks coming in during that time. Thankfully, I had savings, so I was able to fall back on those. But yeah, it was just kind of frustration at the being limited in my ability to affect change. And so now it's like it's my company. If I don't like working with a certain client, it's like I can pull the plug whenever I want to. So I have that leverage
Right.
dating clients and then choosing the ones that I really like to work with. And, I get to stick the reps that my best reps with the clients that I really like. And then the ones that don't pay me on time and things like that, they kind of get the bottom rung. So
Well, that's great. And I think that leads into kind of one of the main things that I loved about when I was getting connected with you was that you were so focused in the pest control space and that you really kind of defined that niche. Um, there's a many marketing agencies that I've seen and I've talked with that really struggle to find a niche, and they're so broad sometimes when it comes with the clients that they use. What advice would you give to agencies who are trying to niche down? Whether they have experience or they don't have experience in a particular industry, what advice would you give to them?
find your strongest point and hone in on that. Like, don't try to do a million things at once. Just identify your strength and then focus on that. I think the tendency is to like, oh, improve the weakest point, but it may be better to just to cut your losses and focus on what you're doing well at and fine tuning that.
I like that. I had a professor in college who had this idea that, wasn't one of his original ideas, but this idea called strengths theory. It's this idea of focusing in on your strengths instead of focusing in on your weaknesses. Because we do have that tendency often to say, hey, I'm bad at onboarding, or I'm not so great at client retention, or I'm not so good at, and those things are important for you to pay attention to and to improve, right? But often there's more value in doubling down in the strength that you know that you have, whatever that strength might be, right? um, and the thing that you enjoy doing too, right? We often building a business, whether that's a marketing agency, as we're talking about here, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort, right? And if you don't enjoy it, it just becomes a grind. It's grueling and it becomes really hard, right? Whereas if you can find the things that you enjoy and then you can delegate or outsource the things that you don't enjoy, I think it brings a lot more longevity into what you're doing and allows you to survive a lot longer, right? Than you would otherwise if you're just doing all the grueling stuff every day for years, right?
I
So
agree. Yes.
of that. So as you were kind of making this shift, you're going from pest control to now you're running Maverick. There's obviously some different roles that you're taking on. You're a sales manager. You're overseeing a team, a large team. Um, Obviously, in school, you're studying. That's kind of your main focus. But as you're doing that and you're shifting positions and you're shifting roles, I'm sure there's some mindset shifts that had to occur. Um, what do you think were some of the more important mindset shifts that you experienced during those transitions?
Mindset and as far as what? Focusing in on what specifically?
Mindset as far as where you were focusing your attention.
I see.
Maybe did you feel at times that I don't have the skills for this or I don't have the talent for this? And how did you kind of maybe adjust your mindset to try and overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I had a lot of experience in sales and management prior to starting the company, so I already knew what my strengths and weaknesses were,
Hmm.
and what I did want to do and what I didn't want to do. Now, in the beginning, I was wearing a lot of hats. I was doing pretty much everything, all hands on deck with me. And then I had just, very few employees in the beginning, and we were kind of doing it all. And then over time, it was just we ironed out the systems and the processes, and it's gotten to the point now where it's very automated and it's very hands off. And I have a very hands-off approach because I hate micromanaging, and I think people that nobody likes to be micromanaged. And so I just basically have two rules. I'm like, hey guys, like all I care about is don't upset the customers and make sure that the closers' routes are full because I have a team of setters that make they call and they set up these appointments for my closers to go to. So those are
Right.
kind of very just simple rules that I've given and given my employees a lot of autonomy to just figure things out themselves rather than jumping in at everything that
Mhm.
happens. Where it's like if something goes wrong, I was like, okay, guys, figure it out. And I know a lot of people like they're control freaks, like they can't do that or they really struggle to just kind of let go. But that's a big part of business is like you can't do it all. And I've seen owners that try to do it all and they no joke are working 20 hours a day and it's affecting their health and relationships and it's just because they cannot let go and they have to have their fingers in every single cookie jar. And it's like,
Mhm.
dude, it's not sustainable. You're gonna kill yourself. You've got to let go and trust other people. And if you had a bad experience in the past, like I don't know, maybe you need therapy to overcome that. Like but for me, I mean, it's never been an issue trusting people. Like trust definitely like I don't trust let me take that back. So trust is earned with me. It's like if you prove yourself, right? I'm very skeptical in the beginning, but if you deliver a couple times in a row, I'm like, okay, I can trust this guy to do this now. I know that he probably won't be able to do it as well as I could, but as long as he can do it at least 80% as good as I can, I'm good with that.
What are you focusing on when you're looking at building your team, right? We're talking about kind of team building and a little bit about doing that yourself. What are you deliberately doing to help kind of build autonomy within your team members, maybe those who aren't used to that? And what are you doing to help encourage them to be kind of go-getters and take responsibility for their what's in their scope, right?
Yeah, so it starts with hiring the right person because, certain people can only progress so far. It's like their talent level it hits a plateau. And so you have to pick somebody that you has a baseline talent that you can work with. And, I could talk for an hour on what goes into that in terms of hiring. But long story short, it's just I'm very good at reading people. You get really good at reading people when you do sales. And so I'm observing their body language, their speech patterns
Mhm.
things like that, and also getting references to make sure that they can do what they say they can do. So I want other people to back it up, and then from there, that's for my setters, and for my closers, it's a very good qualifier is prior door-to-door experience. So
Mhm.
not just like 1 year. I'm looking for guys that are seasoned door-to-door reps that have been doing it for multiple years because that hardens them. That hardens anyone who does door-to-door. And
Yeah.
in terms of sales, it doesn't get harder than that. And so when you come from cold calling, getting yelled at, to warm leads, walking up to a current customer, it's a total layup for most of them. And they're able to perform at a high level because of that background. Somebody coming from the corporate world, I've never had it work out. because they miss their air conditioned office space that they get to sit inside the
Yeah,
desk and make phone calls all day. When they're outside in the hot sun, it's like, oh, Neil, this is so hot. I'm dehydrated. I'm like, what? Like, so I only hire door-to-door guys because they're tough. They can take it. They're not soft.
right. No, I love that. I love that. Well, as we're kind of just wrapping up for a couple more minutes here, I'd love to ask you a couple more questions. I'd love to get your perspective on what trends that you see kind of in the future of marketing and specifically within your sector with home services. And then what are you guys doing to adapt to those changes?
I think everybody's talking about AI. If you don't adopt AI, you're going to be left in the dust. Everyone will adopt that eventually. And it's just, it's still in the early adoption phase right now. But we are actively looking at ways to implement that and to increase efficiency. And, it just solves so many problems, like people
Mhm.
calling sick last minute really throws things off. There's a lot of, business advantages too, where it's like you don't have to pay payroll taxes. You don't have to worry about there's just so many things that benefit the business owner. And, the flip side is like, oh my gosh, like jobs are going to go away. And I'm like, maybe, but I think the economy is going to adapt. There's going to be roles. There
Right.
will always be roles where you need a human. And my advice to young people at this point in their lives, if you're thinking about whether to go to college or not, my advice is if you don't know, go to trade school. Trade school is something you learn a skill that a robot can't do for the next 20, 30 years. And the
Hmm.
proof that I have to confirm that why that's a good decision is I do a fair amount of consulting for private equity firms, and they want to know about service-based industries because they see the writing on the wall as well. They're shifting their money away, at least a portion of it, into these home service businesses like plumbing, HVAC companies,
Right.
pest control, because their mindset is, okay, AI, robots, what can they do? And fixing an HVAC, is there a robot that probably could fix an HVAC out there? Probably, but it's not available on a mass scale yet.
Right.
So that's my advice to young people is like if you can learn how to do something with your hands, that's going to be your career is going to be future proofed. So that's what I would say to do is go learn a marketable skill, whether that's a trade or sales, high ticket sales. I don't think that's going to get replaced.
Mhm.
Uh, so that's my advice.
Awesome. Great advice, Neil. Thanks. And then our final question, this is a question I like to ask is what is one lesson you had wished you had learned as an agency founder earlier on that could have saved either time or money?
Align yourself with good people and the money will come. If you align yourself with bad people, good luck. So you have to be a very good judge of character because there was one time in particular I was burned quite very, very badly. And it was because I put trust where, trust was there and long story short, didn't get something in writing and ended up burning me. But it was a valuable lesson, right? It's like, I don't care who it is, get it in writing. It could be your brother, it could be your dad, get it in writing. So yeah, I think align yourself with good people. And that's what it's more about who you know than what you know. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've received just, connection that just saved me. It was really just like a godsend, like, oh my goodness, thank you for sending me this referral. This is exactly what I needed in the moment. I wouldn't have gotten that referral had I not networked, had I not known this individual, right? So like put yourself out there and align yourself with successful people. Don't hang out with losers. Cut ties with people who are bringing you down. Even though that decision might be painful, right? It's like I've cut people out of my life who are just energy suckers, right? It's like if somebody's making fun of you and belittling you, it's like, is that worth it? Is that worth it, right? Like be around people, hang around people that build you up and encourage you and support you, and you'll be very impressed with the results.
Awesome. Well, Neil, great final advice. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Again, everybody, this is Neal Rummler with Maverick Marketing and Consulting. Again, Neil, thanks for coming on the show today.
It was a great time. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for joining us in this episode of The Founders Corner, the podcast series for marketing firms and agencies looking to learn and level up their business. You can check out more podcasts and other content from OneBridge Accounting by following the links in the show notes. At OneBridge Accounting, we're all about helping marketing and creative firms organize their finances, maximize their profits, save cash, and automate their accounting and finance functions. Check out our other resources and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.